I'd like to call the meeting to order. Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start with a moment of silence. I'd like for everybody to remember the Ray Young family. Mr. Young passed away. He was a longtime county employee. And also remember everything going on in our country. Please pray for our country. We'll go with roll call. We'll start with Commissioner SCHIMKE. Here. Commissioner Smith is present. Commissioner Culberson. Here. Commissioner STIEBEN. Here. And Commissioner Cause.
Commissioner Cause is here.
All commissioners are present in some form. There's no public comment today, as no one's registered. We'll move on to administrative business. I believe we have Congressman Watkins on the line.
That's right, yes. Hi.
How are you today, Congressman?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good.
I didn't know if we wanted to start with Congressman Watkins, since I'm sure his time is valuable.
Yes, we'll go ahead and start with him. You have the floor, Congressman.
Well, sure. Well, listen, guys, I actually got to ask, has Leavenworth County had any protesters or rioters last couple nights?
Not that I'm aware of as far as anything. I'm sure we've had some small groups of protesters in one area.
No rioting, or
but no, we've had not had any problems.
No bad actors, and we're not.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, that's good to hear. That's obviously it's kind of taken the country by storm, and if anything, kind of taken emphasis away from the coronavirus and recovery. Unfortunately, and it's most of our belief how tragic the story of George Floyd is. It's just so sad, and but there is a difference between protesting and rioting, and also we stand, and I know you guys stand in full and complete support of law enforcement, and so that feels like we've been tracking that as close as anything the last couple of days, and I know it's a concern of yours and everybody in government on all levels. But I know that you also would like to talk about the funds. Obviously the CARES Act funding is intended to go to where it's needed the most, and sometimes it makes it there and sometimes it doesn't. Many counties and municipalities across the country have been frustrated that the monies have been kind of collected and withheld or held at the state level and not dispersed throughout the counties and municipalities where they're possibly in some cases certainly needed more. And there's really no trick of the trade on getting the monies. If there is, me and my crew haven't cracked the code. We participate in weekly, and sometimes it's bi-weekly, sometimes it's weekly calls with the governor, and shall continue to advocate for Kansas Second and getting the relief down to where it's needed the most. So, have you guys been advocating for those monies yourself? And if so, what's the response been like?
Yeah, Congressman, this is Mark LOUGHRY, County Administrator. We have sent a couple of requests to the state. So far, we've had no response. But to be fair, the last request probably would have just arrived there yesterday, I'm guessing.
Right.
To this point, we've had no response, and I think it is frustrating. I believe that At the federal level, they could have addressed it if they simply would have added language to the CARES Act that required it to be distributed similar to what they did for the counties that had, the counties that had over 500,000. I'm not sure why that was the tripping point and why it wasn't spelled out in the CARES Act, other than it was done quickly and they were trying to get the money out. I think it's clear. I think it was clear the intent of the CARES Act that the money is to go, 45% is to go locally, but obviously we have a governor, and maybe other states do too, that have not found that to be in their best interest for some reason.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't agree with that language that you brought up. Didn't like it. It seemed arbitrary. An arbitrary number doesn't capture the spirit. The spirit is that money makes it to where it's needed the most and where it can do the most good. And to me, that the arbitrary number doesn't really capture that. Kind of population size seems to be a bit unrelated. And yeah, when we get back, as we look and try and shore up what could become another bill, hopefully we can rectify the problem. But it was done in the spirit of trying to empower governors to lead, and we've got a governor who likes those resources and is seemingly hesitant to distribute. We'll continue to fight and push, and now that we've spoken, that empowers me even more to bring up another data point as to why she should allocate some to Leavenworth.
Congressman, this is
A lot of counties have been saying the same thing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Congressman, this is Commissioner SCHIMKE. One of the challenges we had, and we've obviously tried to work very closely with our local representatives, is, a selection committee was created that largely excluded municipalities in general, not only the largest municipalities, but those with the most positive cases. And I thought that was both alarming and also incredibly problematic because, again, you have entities that are not governmental in nature that are making decisions for governmental agencies, of which you're not including the largest both in impact and in population in a selection committee. Yet there's a number of members that are in areas where the impact was far less great. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if that's something you and your staff can look into, but we've not had much luck in following up with our local representatives. We have shared our concern with them, and obviously with the governor as well, but hopefully you can shed some light on that.
Well, I don't have anything today other than what I've shared. To be frank, we can continue. We can look into the nature of the problem more and get back with you. But the crux of it is we lobby and advocate that she's got dominion over those monies at this point in time. So we'll continue to work it. But that's what I've got, and as unfortunate as that is. But it hasn't been a problem unique to Kansas or Leavenworth County. It's been a problem all over the country. Not everywhere, but some places more than others. In Kansas, I think more than most. But we'll continue to lobby and advocate for those monies to get down to where it's needed, down to your county.
Okay. Any other questions of the Congressman? Congressman, thank you for calling in, and appreciate everything you do for us.
I wish I had better news for you, and I appreciate your proactivity, and you're as solid as the commissioning crews we've got in the state, and I just am committed to getting you the resources you need out of the CARES Act money.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. You do well.
Thank you. You
Yes,
too.
thanks, Vicki. Bye now.
All right, we have any other administrative business?
A couple of things. I think one is a follow-up to that conversation. I think the lack of action by the governor in distributing these funds makes it, puts us in a position where we don't know if we will get any of the funding or how much. So it handcuffs us in trying to prepare for any future outbreaks. You know, there are changes we have plans for, expenditures that we know we need to make to be prepared for the next round or the next coronavirus, whatever that may be, and that's what the intention of those funds were for. But because of the uncertainty and the governor's lack of action, we can't make those changes. And those aren't things you can just snap your fingers and they happen. We need to be making those plans right now, and that's why it's so frustrating and why I appreciate the Board of County Commissioners giving us the direction to send a letter to the governor and make a demand for those funds.
Mark, at what point, based on if they just received the letter potentially today or earlier in the week, would we be following up with potential, legal recourse based on lack of response?
I think the letter had the 5th as we expected some kind of a response by June 5th because the legislators will be back in session. I think that's correct.
Today.
And then after that, it would be the county councilor.
Commissioner Schimke, members of the commission, the board would have several legal options available to it. The least desirable, but possibly the necessary course of action would be litigation to seek a compelled distribution of the funds received by the CARES Act to the recipients that act clearly intended them to go to.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Stieben. I think it's important to point out to people that the commission that the governor appointed to reopen the state, while Sedgwick and Johnson County are the two largest counties in the state, after you exclude them, Leavenworth County becomes the 4th largest county that's remaining, and we had no representation on that committee or commission at all, and I think that was one thing that was very concerning, that they're going to be distributing these funds, and we do not have anybody at the table. I think that's important, that the reason our letter was sent. But Mark, if you have those statistics from that document that you distributed last week, could you read that off again as far as the amounts each community would be potentially eligible for under this CARES Act here in Leavenworth County?
Commissioner, I don't have that document in front of me. In total, Leavenworth County was approximately $15 million for Leavenworth County, and I believe the largest city, the city of Leavenworth, was like $4 million, and then I think it was roughly $2 million for the smaller communities and $2 million for the county at large.
So very good. I should have asked you about that before the meeting, but that's a substantial amount of money. I think the people in our community need to realize that we're going to fight to make sure that our community receives the fair share of those funds, and certainly it would have been better if it would have been distributed directly to us from the federal government, because here we have the state government potentially intervening. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I appreciate all you've done, Mark, and the staff, and Mr. Van Paris, and everybody that's been involved in this. We need to keep the pressure on.
Well, Mike, thank you for getting the congressman to join us this morning. I think a follow-up, just reiterating, we've had a lot of conversations with our local representatives, and they're concerned about our expenses or where those funds will be allocated. And I have to remind people that if it remains at the state, it's only going to be allocated how the state sees fit. So if you want to see anything being allocated locally, it's the only way it can be done, is to get it to the county and the cities within. So unless everybody feels confident that if you live in Leavenworth County, you're going to get more resources and more bang for your buck with it residing in Topeka, then clearly continue to support the status quo. So.
Right.
This is Commissioner Cobb. Mark, could you kind of do a brief overview of the conversation you had with Senator Moran yesterday?
Sure. Yesterday there was a Zoom conference call with Senator Moran's office. Some of the local folks were invited to that call. I think there were 16 of us on the call. And this concern was brought up by multiple people. Senator Braun kind of kicked the meeting off, and that was his main topic at the beginning of the meeting. And we discussed, Senator Moran said that they're trying to work on a new CARES Act, and it's getting held up because there's some stipulations that people are wanting to put on it that are maybe more political in nature. And, you know, my message was that before they do the next CARES Act, it would be nice if we could get the funding from the first CARES Act to the people who it was intended for and who needed it. And I think that was the message across the board. The school districts talked about their reopening plans for the coming year. The VA was represented, and they talked about how they're starting to do their reopening. They did a phased approach where 25% capacity, then 50, and then they believe sometime by the end of the summer they should be back at 100% capacity. And really one of the good messages from it was none of the entities that were talking had laid off anybody or furloughed anybody, and that in fact they are looking for people, so there are jobs out there. Steve Jack was on and reported what the unemployment rate was, and at the same time these entities are saying that they are not getting applicants for the jobs that they have. So overall it was just kind of an update meeting. Senator Rand appreciated the frustrations that we're having, but kind of like Congressman Watkins, they said it's in the governor's hands now. If they do another CARES Act, it does sound like their intention is to make sure that it is distributed directly to the communities rather than to at the state level.
Thank you.
Any other administrative business?
I do have a couple other things. Commissioner Cos, that was a very brief synopsis of what was an hour and a half long phone call. So if you want any more details, I'd be happy to share them. But that was the gist. A couple other things that we have. One, Trans Systems is working on the Gateway project for the county. They've kind of developed some preliminary data, and I think it would be beneficial if the commission would maybe consider having 2 representatives from the county commission work directly with this group, because right now trying to schedule work sessions is really difficult, and I don't want to hold the project up. So if the Board of County Commissioners would consider maybe having 2 of your members just work directly with Trans Systems and staff to get a game plan going forward so that we can keep that moving along, I think that would be prudent. So if you would consider that today, maybe.
This is Commissioner Cobb. I would recommend that Commissioner Schemke or Commissioner Culbertson or Commissioner Smith be appointed or recommended for that responsibility. They've kind of, especially Commissioner Schemke and Commissioner Culbertson, have kind of championed that issue.
I agree. Are they willing to accept that?
Absolutely.
Then we have our 2 representatives.
Okay, and then for you two, if when you're doing that, if you could just make sure and work through Mr. Knoll and Ms. Baugh to make sure that they need to be involved, just to make sure that they're on top of it and they follow through with any direction that comes out of that before it comes back to the board.
Okay.
The last thing I had, I think, Commissioner, was there was a request for a proclamation.
Has everyone had a chance to read the proclamation? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'll begin reading it. It's a proclamation by the Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners to all citizens of Leavenworth County. Greetings. Whereas Leavenworth County is comprised of many races, ethnicities, religions, beliefs, and cultures. Whereas in the course of living together in our county, there have been divisions based upon these characteristics. Whereas these characteristics make up culture and diversity of which we should be proud. Whereas it is to the benefit of all that we live peacefully, respectfully together in our communities. Whereas by living peacefully and respectfully, we can better attend to the issues that affect us all. Whereas the development of policies and practices that address common issues such as discrimination, racism, and safety are best addressed collaboratively in ways that serve all people. Whereas the county desires to take a positive leadership role toward the advancement of collaboration in those areas that affect all people. Whereas it is essential to maintain well-trained, respectful, and diverse law enforcement to ensure the safety of all citizens and law enforcement officers. Whereas Leavenworth County is comprised of citizens who desire peace, equality, and true justice for all. And whereas the Board of County Commissioners and members of law enforcement community are committed to providing for the safety and well-being of its citizens, regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, gender, beliefs, and culture. Therefore, we, the Leavenworth Board of County Commissioners, do hereby affirm our commitment to ensure that all residents of Leavenworth County are valued and treated with respect and dignity, and do hereby proclaim Saturday, June 7, 2020, Unity Day, and call upon all citizens to work collaboratively to achieve our goals. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the seal of the Leavenworth County on this 3rd day of June 2020. Thank you. Glasses are falling down.
Commissioner, just one other item. I circulated, we have the public hearing for the applicant for the sand quarry in the south end of the county coming up in the first part of July. In the past, we had made a commitment that we would send out the notifications at least 30 days in advance, and in those notifications we would include the rules for the public hearing. Obviously, we updated those a little bit since we have some different restrictions with the coronavirus. I circulated those to you. We intend to send those out Friday of this week, so if you have any comments or concerns on those prior to then, just let me know. But I think we've done a pretty good job of capturing the intent of the meeting and the flow of how things will have to happen that evening. But again, just let me know before Friday morning if you could. So,
okay.
And then that will go out Friday so that they should receive them pretty close to the 30 days notice that we promised.
Okay. Any other administrative business?
This is Commissioner STIEBEN. I just might bring this up that the legislature is going back into session, and I have visited with Senator Braun and Senator Holland about House Bill 2517 being presented as an amendment or being brought back up, which is the tornado relief bill for abatement of property taxes on outbuildings. So folks that are concerned about that issue, I would urge you to contact your legislators while they're back in session, and maybe we can still get this through.
Yeah. I also had spoken with them too on that, and they were wanting support on that also. Anything else on administrative business?
The last topic, last week the commission had asked the senior county councilor to draft a letter for Fire District 1, and I believe he has done that and circulated that, and I'll let him take the lead there.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is David Van Paris. Commissioners, I circulated earlier today a short letter addressed and intended to be sent to the City of Lansing, Delaware Township, High Prairie Township, the Board of Trustees of Fire District Number 1, in which the board sets out that basically due to a declaration by the city, the interlocal agreement will expire on June 30th of this year. Upon the expiration of the interlocal agreement, for want of a better description, it disappears. And consequently, by operation of law, the control and responsibility for the operation of Fire District Number 1 devolves back to the Board of County Commissioners. The letter sets out that is your understanding, that absent any action on the part of the other parties to reach a new interlocal agreement, that will occur, and that you're requesting their cooperation in the transition period so that an orderly and uninterrupted providation of services continues. I anticipate that it will be necessary for county staff to evaluate the current operations. One thing that has been learned throughout this course is that the Fire District Number 1 operates quite well. So it would be incumbent upon the board to examine the operation of Fire District Number 1, but it would be your determination of any, what, if any, necessary changes would need to be made. One concept would be to continue the use of a board of trustees, which I think you're actually required to do, and determine whether to use the existing board of trustees or a new one. But the letter is an invitation to cooperate, as the determination by the parties is that effective June 30th, 2020, the county resumes control of the fire district. And I apologize, the draft reference is Fire District Number 2. That may be wishful thinking. It's Fire District Number 1.
This is Commissioner Stieben. I did have a question for you, Mr. Van Paris.
I will endeavor to answer it.
Okay, if we are going to potentially reconstitute the Board of Trustees for the Fire District, would it be incumbent upon us to make the decision whether we're going to continue with that existing board or put in place a different board, and if so, get that in place prior to the expiration of the interlocal agreement?
Commissioner, I think that is one of the facets of the operation of the fire district that you will need to examine. The letter does point out that the exact details of the assumption of control of the operation by the county will be following, and that is something that the board will need to, as a matter of policy, make a decision upon prior to June 30th. It would be my suggestion it be made prior to June 30th. Of course, one of your options is to continue the existing Board of Trustees on an interim basis while the transition is worked out.
Any other questions on the fire district?
This is Commissioner Cobb. I would recommend or suggest that we schedule ASAP a work session to kind of discuss the issues that have been brought to us today by Mr. Van Paris and Commissioner Stieben.
Okay.
What was the
That's
question?
something we could schedule a work session, talk about this.
Oh, sure.
Next week, week after.
We can definitely put it on the schedule for next week.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, if I could point out, one of the other statements contained in the letter is that upon the expiration of the interlocal agreement on June 30th, by operation of law, you resume control of the fire district. But that is in the absence of any new interlocal agreement. It is my understanding that this board has not foreclosed the discussion of any new successor interlocal agreement, just that nothing has been presented to you.
No, I'm hopeful there will be a new interlocal agreement.
You know, I'd just add to what Commissioner Cos shared. You know, again, it closes very clearly with, you know, we want to maintain the safety and services without interruption. And so there's a current board, a very engaged board. I think we want to have not only communicate, I mean, I think we need to have a work session, but I think we need to have communication directly with them, find out if they have any concerns. Maybe with this change, they're no longer interested. Maybe they are, we don't know. Or for that matter, the other stakeholders. So does the townships have any concern? Does the city of Lansing have any concerns with that existing board? And then obviously work collectively with the group to both find a short-term and hopefully start working towards a longer-term plan. So,
Commissioner Schimke, if the board would like, I can insert an explicit invitation for comment by the parties. I think it's implicit. This board has always been open to input from any of the parties regarding Fire District Number 1, but that could be made explicit in the letter.
That sounds good. This is Commissioner Cobb.
Okay. Anything else under administrative business?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if this letter with the suggested amendment is prepared in order to get this out in a timely manner, I would ask that the board consider authorizing the chairman to sign the letter and have it circulated to the parties.
works for me.
You need a motion for that?
Yes.
This is Commissioner Cos, so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the letter. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Stieben votes aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Anything else under administrative business?
Nothing at this
Just,
time.
Commissioner Culberson, were you able to get a hold of Mr. Maxwell on his concern?
Yeah, on the 911 call.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a cell tower issue.
It's a cell tower issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to get a hold of AT&T and see if there's anything they can do about it.
Okay. All right. I told him I'd follow up with you. Okay. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that needs to be removed?
This is Commissioner Cos. I would like to have the approval of the check register removed for separate vote.
Okay. Any other items that need to be removed? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the check registry removed.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second on the consent agenda with the with the check registry removed. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos votes aye.
Commissioner Stieben votes aye.
Okay. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the check registry.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second on the check registry. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Cos abstains.
Commissioner Stieben votes aye.
All right. We'll move on.
You know, Mark, real quick, one of the line items was obviously a number of expenses related to COVID and our response to it. You know, those numbers will continue to accrue over time as we continue to replace materials that are used. And as you said, as we forecast best practices or additional equipment that maybe we should have on hand for the next whatever type event. I know we're tracking everything closely. Have we seen, is there anything out there that would show kind of where the state's at relative to their expenses? Like I've struggled greatly with the concern of all of our state representatives wondering about our expenses, and yet it would seem that locally there's been 10x the expenses than maybe incurred at the state level. But it could also be my lack of understanding of what the state's doing.
We haven't seen anything that would demonstrate what the state believes to be their expenses to date. I know one of the things that is an allowable expense, and you know they send all their employees home and put them on administrative leave. Obviously, that would be one of the expenses that they could reimburse themselves for. But the $1.25 billion that was allocated to the state of Kansas, if you take the $170 million, give or take, that went to Sedgwick and Johnson counties, that still leaves a pretty good amount of money for the state. It represents about 25 to 30% of their budget. So I'm sure they're looking for ways to spend.
Yeah, it just seems like, again, you have the private sector that did far more testing than anybody. You had the counties that obviously did a considerable amount of testing. I'm unaware of the amount of testing that the state conducted. I do know they're involved in obviously the purchasing of, you know, the stockpiles and PPE and, you know, exams and everything else. I'm just trying to get a feel for, as we look at what the cities have done, the private sector has done, what the counties have done, I'm just trying to get a feel for all the expenses the state would have incurred other than those obvious ones, but okay.
And they'll probably mandate that we have our own stockpile and how we pay for that. And it's going to be an interesting budget coming up if we have to do that.
It's very difficult not knowing if or how much
Well,
of that
yeah,
money
when we're
we
going to get our
actually
money or
get.
not, when we got to, you know, like I said, with $4 million, we don't know. I believe our share is about $4 million.
But there's obviously been transparency on number of tests, transparency on positive tests, transparency on COVID-related deaths. We may disagree when I say transparency, there's at least figures. I don't think I've seen any figures related to anything relative to expenses, I guess didn't know if that exists at all. Okay.
I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
The only figures you see is with the federal money that went to the state.
Sure.
So, anyways, are we ready for Crystal at this time?
Commissioners, this is a follow-up to last week's meeting. There was some discussion about a proposed policy change, and that the board wanted to make sure that we included language that covered the existing developments and any incentives or agreements that they were entitled to. That language has been included. The other item was the commercial building permit fees, to make sure that they were at least as much as the residential. That language has been included too.
Okay.
With that, I'll let Crystal take over.
Good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Chairman and Commissioners. Yeah, as Mr. Loughrry stated, we updated this to include those items which you had requested last week. We did amend the commercial building permit fee to be a minimum of $4,600, and that again includes any traffic impact fees or such that would need to be paid. I believe we have included all of the changes that you have requested, so we recommend approval of this resolution, and of course I'm open to any questions you may have.
The sunset on that was a good idea. Is there any other subdivisions out there that weren't completely built out, that we have vacant lots in where people paid to have the streets put in?
Not for the last 5 years anyhow, and that's about how far back I went. We do have
Okay.
a lot of subdivisions that still have vacant lots in them.
Okay.
The majority of those types of subdivisions do not have internal roads.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure we didn't leave anybody out and
I
then
don't-
say, the clock would start ticking today.
One of the things that we looked at too is that really that policy was not in effect that long, that allowed the change,
Okay.
the switching over. So any of those older subdivisions wouldn't have fallen under that new policy anyway, so.
Okay.
So one of the things that doesn't seem to be included, or maybe I've just missed it, relative to, again, somebody putting in that interior road, would be, is there a minimum number of, homes, for example, that might provide some amount of, I say like a volume discount, for lack of a better term. There's clearly, costs associated with putting in that interior road, and, as an example, if someone was going to say, okay, look, I'm going to develop at least 2 of these lots versus only 1 of these lots, that would be setting a minimum, and under that minimum, we then provide, a certain discount. So, for lack of a better term, say, it's a 50% reduction in that permit fee. So now, by building at least the 2 homes, we're going to be getting the minimum expenses of what it would have cost to build just the 1 home. Now, there's economies of scale. The more homes they build, the better that overall cost is. So I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. Have we explored anything like that that would promote more development at a savings to the developer because of the cost they're incurring to put in that interior road?
So, Commissioner, one of the things that I think that needs to be a separate policy in and of itself, kind of an incentive policy or an economic incentive policy. There's an attempt to get this moving forward, and I don't believe we had a consensus on what something like what you're discussing would look like. And I believe it needs to be separate from this policy anyways, because that would be more of an incentive policy that the board may consider. But certainly, if there is a consensus today that you would like to add into this policy an incentive for larger developers versus the single lot developers, that's something that could be considered as from the board.
This is Commissioner Cos. I would prefer looking at a separate economic development incentive policy.
Okay. Is everybody okay with the 3 years, or does anybody think 3 years
I was
is
just gonna
not
bring that
long
up.
enough?
Yeah, I
By
was-
the time you get approved and you say, okay, you start construction, a contractor's not just waiting to start as soon as it gets approved. That's going to have to be scheduled. Nobody's going to schedule something unless they know it's going to get approved. So I didn't know if 3 years, if people thought, or commissioners thought that 3 years was long enough.
I was
Like
gonna-
5 at the most. I mean, I agree with the sunset, don't get me wrong. It is hard to track these.
I was going to bring that up. What I like about it is that we've changed from the $8,000 permit we had a couple years ago to now $4,600. So I like that. I love that we're getting rid of the RIF and the TIF and trying to justify who pays it, who doesn't pay it. If it's on a state road, if it's on a county road that doesn't exist, you have to go to another county to get to the parcel. It eliminates all those gray areas, so I like that. The only thing that I was concerned about was where did we come up with the 3 years? Because I think 5 or 6 probably would be a better. Because you're riding the wave of the economy, it depends on what's going on, whether you're going to develop that particular year, or if you should wait a year or whatever. So I was just curious.
I'm not going to out anybody, but that was I gave Crystal that direction. I'm not going to out anybody on where that suggestion came from.
Okay.
We wanted to put a number in there.
Okay.
We just,
Which I agree with.
No, I
knew
agree
full
with
well that it would
I
be
agree.
discussed today, what that date actually is. So that's an easy change if you want to
Okay.
go from 3 to 4 to 5. I don't think past 5 is good because
No.
it really does become a problem with tracking. And
Right.
Yeah.
we found the challenges, and Commissioner, I know you've been involved in the county long enough, you've seen these where a letter is issued to somebody 25 years ago and suddenly that letter shows up. There's no record of it anywhere. We just have to take the letter and all of a sudden it has no expiration. So we've started
Right.
putting sunsets on all the letters that we send out and also on these types of things.
I think 5 makes a lot of sense to me. That's where we start out our SUPs and everything else, right? So
Yeah.
That was what I was going to suggest was 5 or
Okay.
6.
So that would just add 2 years to the dates that are listed.
But also it would be any new ones that would be approved.
The new ones would fall under the new policy, this policy we're adopting. This is just to cover the people who are already in place under the policy that we are replacing with this.
Right. And then I guess what I'm referencing is more about the incentive that we would be talking about separately, so, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
This is Commissioner Stieben. I agree with moving it up to 5 years.
Okay.
I can make that change. Should
We go ahead and approve the resolution with the
With that
change.
amendment.
move it, or do you want me to bring it back?
No, I think with that amendment, we can approve it, because it's such a simple, we're just
is.
adding the 2 years
But
to it.
make that part of the motion.
Yep.
Then I'll entertain a motion.
Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on the topic?
Who is that masked man?
Joe Herring, Herring Surveying, 315 North Fifth. I would just, with the 5-year, for simplicity, start the 5-year period today for all 4 projects listed. Some of these projects were held up on some road reviews with the change of engineers. They just now got the ability to apply for NOIs and SWIPs, and they incurred delays outside of their control and really outside of the county's control, but we had new engineering firm reviewing. If you just start all 4 projects today, 5-year period, it's over.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that's the way it would be when you sign the resolution.
The resolution has specific dates set out for each separate project.
Yeah,
And
but yeah.
nobody has built a road. There's not one road in. The only one that has actually pulled permits and building is the one down towards.
Mr. Wellman, he's
Not
got.
on his interior road project. He
Oh.
has not built any there. The Linwood Farms, I think
Okay.
it's called, was the only one that has.
Oh, I mean, he's got roads started.
He does.
I didn't
He's
mean
the only one
basements.
that started road,
No,
yeah.
okay.
So that would be my only
Yeah.
request. Thank you.
Would that cause any issues, Crystal, you think?
I believe we can,
Just the resolution, the date
Well,
the resolution is.
If for nothing else, it's easier to track all 4 of them
At the
5
same
years from
time.
today,
Yeah.
so, instead of several dates.
That might help sell some lots in 4 years.
So you're ready for a motion to?
I am ready for a motion.
I make a motion, we approve Resolution 2020-19 to amend the planning and zoning fee schedule for 2020 for building permits with the change of 3 years to 5 years for the sunset clause.
And that
And
5
then
years
that
start
starts
today.
Any day,
You, next week or today?
today, whenever we
today.
sign
I
it.
think
Today's
we'll
date,
amend this and-
starting with today's date for the
Second.
5-year.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on the resolution. Any further discussion? Then voting.
Aye.
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 Mr. Fogg votes aye.
Commissioner Stephen votes aye.
Thank you. Been a
Thanks,
long
Crystal.
time coming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. That's great.
Thanks for all your work in this.
Thank you. See you in a little bit.
All right. We'll move on to the Leavenworth Historical Society funding request. Has everybody had a chance to look at the information on that?
I did. I'm trying to recall, but I think during our last meeting where we pushed these decisions to later in the year, it was our recommendation that if there is something that's clearly more timely or pressing, whether it was relative to damages or operations or anything else, to try to keep these businesses moving forward, that they reach out. So I assume that's what this is in response to.
Well, and I think we put this off because we were anticipating that there might be some issues, and I think that was before the state withheld our CARES money. So that is exactly the rainy day we were trying to anticipate. So I almost brought this up when we were talking to earlier about the CARES money, because this is exactly why I think we still need to push this off until we figure out where we're at on the other side of this, until we can understand exactly how much money we're going to have. Because nothing changed. We didn't get another $18,306 since we talked about this. In fact, we found out there's money we're not going to have. So I think we just about have to push this off until we figure out where we're at on the other side of this COVID.
This is Commissioner Todd. I agree with Commissioner Culbertson.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Stephen. Has anyone spoken with anyone from the Historical Society about the specifics of this?
These were all repairs that were included in their original request, and I think they've actually been requesting for at least the last 3 years for the same repairs. They're not emergency. Well, I mean, if you look at them, they appear to be emergency, but they're not an emergency in that it was like storm damage related or something broke unexpectedly. It's just deferred maintenance that's been going on for probably, from the looks of it, 100 years on some of those items. So.
I'd be interested in hearing from this board or someone, a representative from their board, on what types of private funding they've been seeking, and does this $18,000 represent a portion of the repairs that are being made there? And just I'd like to have a little more information. But I definitely support, helping them out. But like Commissioner Culbertson said, we need to know what our budget is before we commit to spending. So I think we definitely need to wait.
And Jeff, just to be clear, man, I don't disagree. My bigger concern is when you see a hole in the floor, are they no longer able to operate? And is this going to be one more business specific to COVID that because it hit us, is closing down? I mean, I wanted to know those specifics, whether or not they can remain open and continue doing business now that businesses are effectively opening back up, or without these repairs, or some amount, maybe it's a far lesser amount, can get them back open while we figure out the rest of it. I just, I didn't know enough about those damages and whether or not they can continue normal operations. Generally speaking, when you have a hole in the floor, I wouldn't think that's
That
acceptable
porch
conditions. But.
Yeah, that porch has been closed for at least 2 years.
Okay.
Maybe 3.
So the facility's open, you just can't access the porch.
That porch, yeah.
Okay.
Those are, Commissioner Stephen, those are the exact kind of questions that we ask when we have them come in and present their requests. Since we moved everybody else off, if you're going to ask one in, I just think it would be fair that we ask all of the applicants in, or we just stay the course with what we've said previously, which is we're going to wait until we see what happens budgetarily and address these towards the end of the year. That would just be my, handle them all the same versus allowing one to come in outside of that normal request process.
And just for the record, Mark, didn't we have you check on what our collection rate was versus last year to this year? And it definitely shows that it's short.
On property tax collections?
Property tax collections were down. The sales tax collections so far, I don't know that we have enough data to confirm one way or the other. So far, we've been very fortunate. We've either been holding the line or ups. So if that continues for the next 2 to 3 months, I think that changes our attitude towards projects like this that we could.
But that's exactly my point, is we need a little time to make sure.
And we will have that information shortly because we're going to already start working on the budget.
Budgets, right?
Yes.
We've seen April.
So sales tax collections, it varies because some businesses pay quarterly, some pay monthly. The state, depending on when you get your payment to the state, even though you make your deadline for the month, if you don't get it to the state by a certain date, they don't distribute it to the county until the following month. So some collections are up to 2 months in arrears.
Okay.
So I think it would be, we would feel a lot better about where we're going to be after next month's, the one coming in June's collection. But really, you still need to wait for that second, or that, I guess we get that midway point in June to July. Would be
I was going to say,
more
the best,
comfortable.
in the best case scenario, they've seen through April, and I'm guessing a lot of them still haven't seen the April impacts, most of which people are reporting on Q1, and Q1 was largely
Right.
unimpacted. So, and I think the property tax number was, what, 3.5 million, give or take, was the
Yeah.
delinquency difference between last year and this year on second half payments?
Yeah, it's a few percentage points. An increase in delinquent collections, it's a few percentage points of our total collections. But it is up, and given that the penalties and fees have been waived, I would suggest that it's probably going to stay up, because I don't think the people who haven't paid are going to run out and pay now.
Right. That was amazing leadership by the state, wasn't it, that they waived all of that the same day they were due?
Well, some people maybe knew it was coming, I don't know.
This is Commissioner Stieben, a question for Mr. Loughrry. If we do nothing, our earlier decision stands, correct? If we just do nothing, our earlier decision was to move these off towards the end. So we basically can just, if we don't take any action, our earlier action would stand.
Correct.
Do we need a motion on this, or can we just do a
No.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Just
No
a
motion at all
consensus?
is probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
consensus that we just stay the course? Okay.
This is Commissioner Cos. I would recommend that Mr. Loughrry make contact with the Carroll House Mansion and express that although we appreciate the needs that they have shared with us, that we will be making those decisions as planned, and that I think that we need to also, we have a set budget for the allocation for that type of funding, and we need to give fair consideration to, in a meeting, to all of those requests. And that can't be done pulling individual ones out that are not truly emergency requests, because if we fund that $18,000, it significantly reduces the remaining funds that we have to allocate, and we really need to be able to fairly justify that.
That is correct. That's absolutely spot on there. So I think it's got to be everybody in here. We divide it up however.
One thing that came to mind after these requests have came in and us delaying it was, this year for many people, I think travel is going to look very different. I mean, how many trips have already been canceled, whether that was summer vacations or otherwise? Maybe, I don't know who best to work with, whether it's the Chamber, LCDC, a conglomeration of the two, but to do a really concerted effort to help promote all of these destinations that we have locally. So if you're not going to be traveling, outside the state for whatever those reasons may be great to drive a lot of our existing traffic to these locations, and maybe we can make up some of the difference through the retail sales. So
Could have a museum poker run.
I mean, there's got to be something that they could or should do to help promote themselves, and whatever we can do to help them with that.
Sure.
Yep.
This is Commissioner Cos. I would also, I don't have their original request in front of me right now, but, a roof that is damaging artifacts or, things like that might be something that we need to look more carefully and seriously at. But, the porch, although it would be nice to be able to get it opened up as soon as possible, that they do have access to the building, by other means. So I think that lumping it together and asking us for the $18,306 is something that they should have kind of thought about.
Okay. All right, any other further discussion on it then?
Well, since we're talking about it, I just want to make sure we're all on the commission still on the same page that we last year adopted to practice that we're matching funds.
That's correct.
So whatever they're asking for, they have to be able to come up with the same amount that they're asking from us. So I just want to make sure we're all still on the same
Right.
page with that.
That hasn't changed.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct. Okay. So is there anything else for the board at this time before we go to our work session? Not a whole lot to report on. I did get an email from someone that lives in the county about responsible pet owners. Just so that I'd pass that or share it with the board and we can look at it.
I got a copy of that.
Oh, you all got it? Okay, I thought I was the only one that got that. All right. So we can discuss that at a later day. But
Millwood Bridge is getting tore down. I'd say from the looks of it this morning,
it should be gone
day after tomorrow, it'll probably be gone.
just in time for it to rain tonight and the creek to get up.
Yeah, maybe that'll help them wash it away.
Is there any other hurdles we are going to have to get over on this bridge?
So far, we've jumped them all.
I was
so.
thinking maybe the good Lord was trying to tell you there doesn't need to be a bridge there. With all the hurdles that have
I said from the beginning we should have built a dam instead of a bridge. Lake Potter.
Lake Potter, there you go. So, any other commissioners had anything meetings they've attended or anything that need to be brought up?
This is Commissioner Cobb. Commissioner SCHIMKE and I did attend the Port Authority meeting. I also participated in the workforce development meeting and the FEMA funds meeting for food and shelter programming that was hosted by the United Way. And funds were distributed to 5 different local organizations that provide those types of services in Leavenworth County. And I listened to the City Commission meeting last evening, which is how I knew that Mr. LOUGHRY had participated in the phone conference, the Zoom meeting. And I want to remind people that on Saturday there will be a peaceful walk at 9 a.m. that begins at the Bristol Allen Cultural Center and ends at Bob Doherty Park. Participants have been requested, and all efforts will be made for social distancing and for, when possible, individuals wear their masks as they gather together.
Okay. And that's Saturday at what time?
9 a.m.
9 a.m.?
They meet at 9 a.m. meeting at the Richard Allen Cultural Center, which is on 4th Street, and I don't recall the intersection, but it's not far down from Metropolitan Avenue.
Okay. 9 a.m., June 7th. Anything else? Then a motion to... Excuse me? Go ahead.
Nope, all for me.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think just tomorrow we got a couple of presentations on the tech committee to look at the potential vendor for new websites. So I believe Vicki, myself, there's a whole host of folks that are going to be involved, but that's tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have something to report later this week or next week, Larry and team. So.
Okay. That's good. We need to... Seems like a lot of people are concerned. Or they depend on our website. Yeah. So, anyway, then I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Voting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner